Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, listeners. How are you all doing today? Tommy boy, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, buddy. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So we have an interview lined up today. Want to tell us who that special guest is, Tommy?
So this interview is a very special guest, good friend of ours. I've known him myself since high school. He rides motorcycles. He is a almost professional Instagram food photographer and a coworker of mine. His name is Mike Pistone, and he's on the show today to talk to us about his business of making knives.
It's quite an interesting hobby, which I thought the best thing for us to do for a knife interview is drink a little Scotch whiskey. So what I want everyone to do, if you're home right now listening to this podcast, I want you to go into your liquor cabinet. I want you to find something brown. I want you to see if you have some Scotch, some whiskey, Captain Morgan, brandy. Get a nice glass, pour it on in, drink it neat or on the rocks. That's your call. And join us with this episode with a nice liquor. Now, if you're driving, listening to this, obviously don't do that.
Don't recommend that.
That's a little dangerous.
It's not a good call.
And we can't be seen endorsing drinking and driving. However, if you are in fact driving and you're listening to this, what I think the last 2 weeks, I don't know what it was, very hectic. Since Memorial Day passed, I just feel that everything is just exploded. And everything we talked about on our episode Normalcy has just happened. Traffic sucks. The drivers suck and everyone just sucks. And the first day I went out after Memorial Day, when the world kind of opened back up again, people are not washing their hands. And we're back to normal again. So I think what we need to do is just have a drink. You deserve it. Go to that liquor store, buy a bottle of whiskey, buy a bottle of scotch, buy some rum. I don't really care. Go home and enjoy a nice drink tonight and relax.
You made it.
Tonight, I am drinking a Glenlivet 12 single malt Scotch whiskey double oak. Gonna open this puppy up. It's actually a brand new one that I've had since I've been from New Jersey into PA. Trying to, of course I can't fucking open it. God fucking damn it. Clearly, this is not a good advertisement for Glenlivet.
It's childproof.
Right?
That makes it a really good advertisement. You want one the kiddies aren't going to water down.
I'm actually really pissed off right now that I'm not able to open it.
Are you hitting it on the floor?
I'm actually trying. God damn it.
Use your teeth.
So how about while I'm doing this, you tell us what you're drinking today.
Well, I am drinking, courtesy of our guest tonight, Mike Pistone. I am drinking a Knob Creek Rye. So I've already got mine open and ready to go. So I'll just pour mine. Ooh, that is a heavy pour.
I'll tell you, I really thought it would be cool, the sound effect of me just nicely opening up the cap and being able to pour it in. Like in my head, this opening sounded so much better. So hang on. There we go. See, that sounded really cool. Nice pour it in the glass. And I'm going to pour myself a very generous pour because if I'm going to drink tonight, I might as well get a little buzz going on.
Might as well just do it.
So, Tommy, before we welcome our guests, I just want to cheers you from across the state.
Cheers, buddy. And cheers to you, viewer. Thanks for sticking around and listening to us.
Very appreciated. We're almost at 250 downloads with 6 episodes. So thank you all so much.
We appreciate you.
This is very good.
Yeah. I gotta say, this Knob Creek is definitely very smooth.
The Glenlivet 12 gets my endorsement.
Very nice.
So everyone, we are going to be welcoming Mike in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I like this a lot. Tommy Balls. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not even allowed to change my name.
Really?
No.
Oh, it sucks.
It sucks, really.
I know. I was hoping for Tommy Balls and Christopher Armadillo.
Yeah.
Tom and I were just talking about that today. We were talking about how, like, in the one episode, you're talking about Brett Favre's name, and people just kind of barrel through like how things are supposed to be pronounced. And we were talking about how Italian Americans are the worst offenders that just
we are.
absolutely like destroying any sort of pronunciation and, like with the spelling. I know my dad does it all the time.
There's actually there's a funny Twitter account. It's called I think it's called like Guido Voice or something. And it's just this picture, like this really fat, like stereotypical, like city Italian guy, and all the takes are really bad, and like everything he says is just typed out like phonetically, like someone like that would say it.
Well, it's Mike Pistone.
Yeah, it's like after decades of idolizing organized crime, Blue Lives Matter.
It's accurate.
Yeah.
What the fuck just happened? Hold on. I just lost my audio in my headset and I hate my life.
Oh.
Nope, we lost him completely.
Well, that'll happen.
And that's all we got on Mike Pistone.
And he was never heard from again.
Okay, there we are.
We're
back.
There he is.
Yeah, I don't know what
back in
happened. I tried
action.
to like change my volume and then all of a sudden it just like took everything off my headset here. But
That's what happens. Touch the volume and it shits the bed.
That is always how it happens.
Chris can tell you a funny story about fucking volume.
What happened?
So we were doing our intro first just to get that piece all kind of over with. The first 12 minutes was the show was like we started the call and I couldn't hear Tom, but I knew he was talking because I see the blue arrow moving. And
Yeah.
I thought the volume on the microphone superseded the volume on the laptop, but the laptop volume was off. So that actually supersedes the microphone.
I'm just in my house yelling.
I just love picturing that.
Yeah. I'm like, hold on. I see the bar moving. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always annoying.
So I guess let's kind of hop right into this. So Mike, real quick, just full disclosure, I already fucked up and dropped a couple F-bombs, so this is now an explicit show.
I'm all down with explicit.
All right, very good.
Yeah, I'm looking for an MA rating.
Yeah,
right,
there we go.
Yeah.
And
MALSV.
Yeah, porn talk.
how do we want to do this little intro thing?
3, 2, 1. Hey, Mike. What's going on?
Pretty good. How about you guys?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. I'm honored to be on the show.
Very
Glad
nice.
you were able to make it.
I wish we got that kind of acclaim from every guest. That's going to be mandatory from here on out.
Exactly.
So
That'll
Mike,
be in the prep work.
Yeah.
I know you're a Scotch whiskey connoisseur because I noticed from time to time that you like to drink whiskey. So I thought a little extra piece to our episode would be everyone having a nice little glass of whiskey to have with you. Now, I'm drinking a Glenlivet neat because I know you'd make a comment if I threw an ice cube or two in there. So I am cheersing you from Pennsylvania with a nice 12-year-old Glenlivet double oak.
Ooh, yeah, that's good. I am cheersing you from New York over here with actually I went local this time. This is I'm drinking a bourbon from Taconic Distillery, and I'm part of the Facebook group, this bourbon group, and they went and did a barrel pick. It was an exclusive barrel pick, and that's what I'm drinking right now.
Very nice. I am drinking the Knob Creek Rye that you gave me a sample of a few months ago. So nicely aged in my cabinet here in Lake Katrine.
That's right.
Good stuff. It is really good, actually. I do have to say, it's very nice.
I dig Knob Creek, to be honest. It is like that's a pretty good go-to. You can find it pretty much everywhere. It's pretty cheap, 100 proof. It's solid, and everything they do is good.
Yeah, it's really smooth. It's a
move.
nice accessible whiskey.
Yeah, that's what I used to drink over at Brown Bear when I wanted to get really messed up on a Thursday night.
Well, that
Knob Creek will do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mike, walk us through what made you decide to pick up the hobby of knife making one day. What was the kind of catalyst that sort of made you say, like, you know what, I want to do that?
Well, it's like most things. Once I get interested in something, I get a little obsessive and I go kind of down a deep rabbit hole, at least for a period of time. And knife making was no different in that regard. I've always liked knives. I've always carried knives when I could. I've always been interested in the whole thing and, obviously glorified all of the action movies, we grew up with and all that stuff. And everyone has a badass knife, the Rambo knife and all that. I didn't realize that people were making custom knives up until a few years ago. And just collecting like regular production style stuff led me down this path of, who are these people that, the names I'm hearing of, the designers and such. And I'm just like, well, I mean, how do you even get into designing a knife? Who's making these knives? I kind of figured everything was done, on a production line or in a factory. And then that kind of turned into me seeing that people are making knives, in like home shops, or they're forging and, doing all sorts of, like cool stuff, and just, making knives from scratch, which kind of blew my mind. And then that turned into like, okay, how does one make a knife? I always figured it was, I mean, it is an involved process, but a really involved, like process with machinery, et cetera. And at its most basic form, it's steel that's shaped and then hardened so it can, like hold this edge, and there's like a lot in between. And then, it's a cutting tool at that point. I'm basically making, like fixed blade knives, which are usually something that's carried in a sheath, and it's just a solid piece. I didn't know people made custom knives. I've always been interested in knives and such. And I started looking it up, and I realized that people are making stuff at home. And I'm like, how could you possibly do that? And that's turned into, I'm learning, metallurgy and all the processes. I mean, I've kind of made every component of, the knives that I've been making. I've been making my own handle material. I make my own sheath. I go through the entire process of cutting out, like shaping, profiling, grinding, bevels and such, drilling, heat treating, which includes hardening, and then tempering, which I do it in-house because I use carbon steel, and we can get into all that and everything too, the difference. And so I've been, doing all that for now a couple of years, I guess. And originally it was all just for me. I just thought it'd be fun to make a knife. And then turned into
that definitely seems like
for other people.
Yeah, I mean, that making your own knife just seems like a badass thing to do in its own right. To be at where you're making them for other people now as well, that's gotta really feel like an accomplishment.
Oh, for sure.
How long roughly does it take you to complete a knife? Let's say I come up to you and I say, Mike, I want a knife. How long roughly does that process take?
Well, ultimately, it would take. I could, in theory, if I had like an entire day with no interruptions or anything, you could make it 2 days. Because essentially, and part of that isn't physical work. It's simply like heat treating and tempering and having stuff in the oven for hours, and things like that, curing with the epoxy when you're putting the handles on.
Sure.
That's not like active work. There's a lot of like active work that goes into a knife. All of that in its most basic form is probably like 10 hours of kind of barreling through a knife, not including the heat treating and the epoxy curing and all that.
Sure. So there's a fair balance kind of just waiting for the sort of processes to take place in addition to the kind of things you actually have to do, like manually to manipulate, the metal and the handle and everything else into a working knife.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, I mean, my timeline's a little screwed up in the sense that I don't typically make one knife at a time. I typically work in batches, and that's because my time's a little limited. I mean, as you guys know, I work a lot of hours like during the week. I have, like family and all that. So I'm not really itching to just go in the garage for 5 hours as soon as I get home, like every night. So every once in a while, I'll get out in the garage for a couple hours here and there, do some stuff over the weekend. And I'll usually work in a batch of, I don't know, maybe somewhere between like 5 and 10 knives. And so I can go through some of the processes at the same time. And it cuts down a little bit on the time per knife overall. Sure. When you get to the end of it.
Yeah, it's an efficiency thing. That makes sense.
For sure. A double-edged sword, as well, in the sense that I'll get hung up on certain processes because they're a little boring and it's not something I necessarily want to do. And I don't get that gratification right away of like making that knife, having that knife finished, selling that knife. I feel like that always kind of motivates me to get going on the next one. And sometimes when I work in these big batches, like I'd started a batch, it was like 35 knives. I guess it was a few months ago. And it was overwhelming in the sense that, when I would get to stuff that I didn't feel like doing, I didn't want to go out in the garage and do it. So that kind of held me up.
That's a big batch. Jesus, 35 knives.
Yeah, it's sometimes I'll start big and then I'll kind of slim it down. My process, let me back up real quick. I do stock removal at this point in time, which is essentially working with piece of steel to begin with and not forging it. I'm essentially cutting out the profile of the knife. Like I'm shaping what the knife profile is going to be, cutting it out, grinding it down, everything and cleaning that up. But I'm not like turning around and like forging out, like with a hammer and an anvil. Not that I wouldn't love to do that, but I don't really have the space and everything right now.
So that's essentially how it starts then, is you get like a big piece of steel and then individually each blade out from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So people usually have a misconception. They just assume that, like, oh, knife is steel, so steel is steel. And, anyone could just get a piece of steel and shape it into a knife, and then it's a knife. And the argument in the knife making community is if you don't have a good heat treatment on it, then essentially you're making a knife shaped object. It's like a shank. It's really not a knife. Like really the soul of a knife, as they say, is the heat treatment. It actually being something that can withstand abuse, hold an edge, and that comes with getting hardened and then tempered back and everything. So yeah, if you just, go out and take a piece of mild steel from Lowe's or something and make it shaped like a knife and then put an edge on it and all this stuff, I mean, it's going to dull immediately. It'll bend, it'll, stay in that position, et cetera, which isn't what you actually want a knife to do. So
can you elaborate on that heat treatment piece? Because that seems like it's one of the most important parts of the knife making. Like you just said, it's between a shank and a knife because of the heat treatment. So like explain that. What is the heat treatment?
Look, what I use high carbon steel. There's all sorts of different steels. They have all sorts of different, chemical properties and such. There's stainless steels and everything, which requires a much more involved heat treating process, which I don't have like a kiln for or anything. So right now I'm kind of going carbon steel, which is a common choice. It holds a good edge, and I can do my heat treating in-house, out of like a forge with a quenchant, which is I use, oil. And so what that is you'll have a piece of steel. And it's a piece of workable steel. I know it's high carbon. I know it's going to harden. I know it has like a heat treat recipe. So let's say we've gotten to this point. I've cut out a knife. I've drilled it out. I've profiled it. I've done whatever I want to do to kind of finish it off before it's going to get, hardened. And today's my day. I'm going to be heat treating it. I have a forge on, which, gets very hot. I'm going to bring this knife up to its almost critical temperature, which is, let's say, about 1475 degrees, upwards in that range. At 1425 degrees, it loses its magnetivity. So you can't actually touch it with a magnet anymore. It won't, well, you can, but it won't stick. It won't be magnetized. So I usually, I give it a little bit past that. It'll bring it up to 1475 degrees. And then from there, I will quench it in an oil that I've heated up to about 120 degrees or so, because that enhances the viscosity and kind of loosens it up so you can get it cooled. When you plunge it into the quenchant, what you're doing is you're rapidly cooling it down from its critical temperature. And you're essentially taking what's called a austenite and turning that, it's transforming into martensite. There's a chemical process happening where it's hardening and it turns into martensite. It's like a crystallized carbide structure, but it's like controlled carbides. Like you don't just want a bunch. And that's again, I'm no metallurgist really. This is just kind of how I understand it. So I'm probably butchering some of the science behind this. At that point, it gets hard and like really brittle. Like at that moment, if you drop it onto, let's say, the concrete floor, it'll break. Like it would, break in half, which would obviously seem weird, drop a piece of steel in it and it breaks. But it's because you've actually changed its chemical composition at this point, and it is super, super hard. So then from that, you turn around and you temper it, which is bringing it into a much lower heat, but it's enough to just kind of not ruin your heat treat, but back it down a tiny bit. There's a hardness scale. They use HRC, and I don't remember what that stands for, but usually you'll be upwards in the 60s or higher when you fully harden. And then when you bring it down, you're usually in like the lower 60s or upper 50s in terms of your HRC scale. And that makes it so it can sort of take a little bit of abuse. It can bend a little bit, it can return to its shape, and it's not going to turn around and just snap or get stuck in its bent position. And that's kind of what you're looking for. If you get like a really cheap knife and you go to pry something with it, yeah, chances are like it'll get stuck, like in that position or break or something like that. And that's usually due to the heat treat not being done well, which is pretty common for cheap steels and, cheap knives and, stuff that's kind of like barreled through.
We're on the topic of like the heat, right? So, in movies, when they're burning the sword in the fire, like the medieval times, and they're hammering it when it's severely hot, is that them reshaping that metal?
Yep. Yeah. So that's how forging works. Essentially, you go even past that point that I'm talking about, that like 1400, 1500 degrees, you're bringing it up to like a bright yellow heat, probably upwards in like the 2000 range. And it depends on the steel. You can bring them, past that, but certain steels want it to be forged, kind of hot. Some want to be a little lower. Some can be a little finicky. And yeah, from there, you're actually moving the metal metal. Like you're softening the metal because you're bringing it up to such a point that it's becoming malleable. And then you're hitting it with the hammer and forging it out and kind of spreading it out. Those movies usually don't necessarily depict it very well because then, they'll turn around and just kind of hold it in the air and be like, oh, here, I forged this sword or something. It's like, yeah, but you didn't quench it or do anything. You just put it in the fire a bunch of times. That's like ruined everything.
So you don't go to that heat level. You're basically designing your knife on the sheet of metal in advance, but you're not making any changes with the heat. So you're not going that extra step. So your design is already done, and I'm assuming that's because it's not a sword, it's a knife, it's smaller.
I mean, yes and no. You could certainly use a giant piece of steel and just cut a sword out, from it, and also, alternatively, there's plenty of people that forge knives, and I mean, I would like to, but right now, I work in a very small garage, like half of my 1-car garage that I've hijacked to be this little knife shop and then also, house all of my other, toys. Forging is cool in the sense that you can actually take just a piece of steel and shape it however you want. So you don't have to take, let's say, a sheet of steel that's the thickness that I already want, et cetera, and then, cut out my profile. You could take, let's say, something like a ball bearing, as long as it's made out of a reasonable steel that's going to harden and actually be workable for you. You could, in theory, take that and, hammer that out and shape it out and make that some sort of bar or, shape it into your final knife. In that regard, shows like, Forged in Fire are pretty cool because they'll, make people do things like that. Be like, oh, well, all you have is this leaf spring and like ball bearings. You have to make Damascus out of it. And
so that's cool. So basically, as long as it's like a decent steel and you can get it hot enough to be malleable, you can, in theory, make a knife out of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's really cool. So as far as the knife making process goes, is the blade, I know obviously you make the handle separate. Is there like one contiguous piece to the knife? Like is it a blade and the handle and then you put the handle over top of it? Like is there one piece of steel that connects the blade and the handle itself, or is it two completely separate things that you fuse together?
No, it's all one solid piece. I mean, there's a handful of different ways you can assemble handles. All of the ones that I've been doing are considered full tang, which is when you're looking at it from the side, when I'm cutting out my profile, it looks like a knife. I mean, it looks like the handle shape and then, the actual knife shape, etc. When I'm putting on the handles, I'm putting on 2 pieces of handle material that then are going on each side of the knife and then getting epoxied together and, like pinned through to keep, the forward motion from shearing anything off.
Okay.
So then they handle get shaped so you can hold on to it, but you can see the steel like all the way back, like from the front of the knife all the way back to the butt of the knife, I guess.
Okay. So the handle is basically like a kind of casing that goes over. There's like one, it kind of goes over like the skeleton of the knife in the handle itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's other ways to do it too. There's, what's called a hidden tang, which is something you'd see where you'd see like the knife shape up front, your actual blade shape. And then it almost just looks like a stick kind of poking off the back, not something that would be comfortable to hold on to. And that ends up going into a solid piece of handle material, let's say like a block of wood or something, and then you drill holes in there and then shape it all up so it then gets epoxied and slid in that way. And at that point, you wouldn't be able to actually see the knife back through the handle because it's inside the handle material. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's cool. all different, kind of useful for different things.
Is the handle the last part you do, or is that mid-process?
I'd say that's probably about mid-process, about 3/4 of the way through. Really, the last thing that I do is make the sheath. That's another part of it. It's probably my least favorite part of it. At that point, it's a little nerve-wracking. You're at like the end of the whole build. There's so much that can go wrong, and then it'd be really hard to fix. And then you're over here making a sheath that can easily just scratch, something you've worked really hard on. But yeah, I make Kydex sheath.
Yeah, walk us through the sheath process. How exactly does that work? Now, do you have to measure the sheath kind of based around like the knife itself, or do you make the sheath totally separately and then just do you already have like the dimensions of the knife when you make the sheath? Like how exactly does that work?
If I was going to do it in sort of like a production line sense, that's how I would do it. Like there are people that do that where they have every knife is exactly the same and they'll, have someone like CNC like the sheaths. So everything like fits. For my purposes, what it's doing is I'm actually molding the sheath shape to the finished knife and then finishing off the sheath. I'll end up, let's say with this knife, it's already been heat treated and ground and finished off. The bevels are all set. Everything is finished. The handles are on epoxied. shaped. For all intents and purposes, that knife is ready to get a final edge and given to someone. At that point, what I do is I'll usually tape up the blade, as I said, to, protect the blade from getting, scratched. I use what's called Kydex, which is like a thermoplastic. And then I use kind of its high density foam. It's special foam that returns to its shape and is pretty firm and is useful for high heat, isn't going to, melt away. You bring Kydex, I forget the exact temperature because I usually just look at it and kind of eyeball it before it starts to melt, because then that's a little too far, but it'll start to curl under the heat. It's a sheet of Kydex. I'll put in, let's say, my toaster oven that's out in the garage. It starts kind of curling up. It's at that point, it's really malleable. It's soft. It's kind of rubbery. It'll move all over the place. I put that into my press, which is that foam I was talking about that I have glued to some pieces of MDF. And then I have a door hinge that's holding them together. I have that open. I have the piece of Kydex in there. I have my knife laid in the Kydex, and then I have it either folded over for what they call a taco style sheath, or I have another piece of heated Kydex as well on top of it, which is it's just different. It's how you fasten it is a little different, doesn't fold over the top. And then from there, I clamp it all down, and it has all that pressure and it cools. And that's what leaves it in that final shape that's the shape of the knife and, let's say, the finger choil and stuff, something that's going to hold retention for when you're entering and exiting that sheath. So it's not just going to be, sloppy and falling out. And then from that point, I have a piece of Kydex that is resembling the shape of the knife. In terms of the form it has, and then I have to start drilling holes to fasten it, and then I have to grind that down to shape. I have to usually grind around the back, like around like the mouth of it, and then from there it's kind of fine tuning. It's finish sanding and making it look nice, pressing rivets into the Kydex to hold it. I have like an arbor press that's set up for the rivets and everything. And then at that point, when it's finally good and I can, get that good click of that sound when the knife's going into the sheath and, still pulls back out and everything, that's when it's actually done and, ready to just get that last final edge, and then it's good to go, ready to be sold.
Very nice. Very cool.
Yeah. Everything's kind of a process. It's fun though. It's fun having all the, the different stuff.
Putting the sheath piece aside, what would you say is the most time-consuming piece of the knife making, and then the most difficult part? Just because it's the most time-consuming doesn't mean it's the most difficult piece. Where is it almost like if you make a mistake, it's done, you have to start over again?
I think the thing for me that really throws me for a loop every time and, just kind of scares me, whether it be exciting or really just terrifying, is grinding in the bevels. The bevels are essentially where it goes from the top of the knife and then tapers down to the edge to make it sharp, like kind of a V. So if you think about it, if you look at the front of a knife, like if you're just looking right down the front of a knife, you'd see that the top is a certain thickness, and then it tapers down, and then the two sides meet down in the middle, and then you have an edge. So grinding in those bevels can be a little nerve-wracking. It depends on kind of what I'm trying to do with it. Some grinds are a little easier than others, or you have a little more flexibility, but some of them can be really difficult. And then, one slip is sometimes, an ender, or at least for what you're trying to do. I mean, half of knife making for me is screwing it up and figuring out how to recover, which I think is kind of fun and exciting in its own way.
So you're talking about like point, because obviously you got sharp, which would be like the whole blade itself, but you're now talking about the point of the knife, like that really pointy part, not even the tip, like the point.
Yeah, essentially, like I'm talking about, like if you took a knife and you put it on you right now, and what would cut you, like that's the edge of the knife, and those are what's leading to that. Like they're called the bevels.
Okay.
So is that like the part of the like the very center of the knife, like that kind of sticks out? Or are you talking about like the actual, like the beginnings of the edge itself?
It's kind of the beginnings of the edge. It's what makes like a flat piece not flat to the edge. Like to give you an idea, like right now, if you had, let's say, I mean, we'll use a piece of steel as an example, like a 1/4-inch piece of steel. It's a 1/4-inch thick. Doesn't matter what you try to do. You could rub it, like on your arm all you want. It's not going to cut you. It's just a piece of steel that's a 1/4-inch thick. You have to grind it down to an angle, to a triangle, to a tip, for it to actually be sharp enough to cut you. That process and the design of essentially taking that rectangular piece and then changing it to be like a V shape is, those are essentially grinding bevels. Those are bevels. And a lot of knives are different. There's some kitchen knives you'll see you don't even really notice. So some kitchen knives are what they call full flat, which is you can't even tell essentially that they're ground down from the side profile. You just look at them, they all look the same. It just goes straight through. It's not until you actually take that knife, let's say from your side profile that you're looking at it, and then turn it, facing you, that you'd actually see that there's an angle reaching down to the bottom that creates an edge. There are other types, like a lot of the ones really that make me more nervous are the ones that are a little more precise in the sense where they begin and end and they need to meet on both sides. And it would be something that's maybe stopping about halfway up the knife, because you have a lot less leeway in terms of those not being perfect, because you'll have some horizontal lines, some vertical lines. They have to meet at a certain spot, and if they don't, then it just looks like shit. So that's probably the hardest thing for me to do when it comes to knife making. I mean, aside from, as I said, it being kind of terrifying near the final steps, because you're really just like, man, I've spent a lot of time like doing this, and now there's a chance that it's just going to get completely destroyed. Do you guys hear my dog just like choking right now?
Story of my life.
Yeah. Apparently drinking water was too hard at this hour.
Sometimes it's tough,
You've got to be fucking kidding me. It's funny too, because I tried to set everything up so it wouldn't just be really noisy while I was doing this, and it's like she's my one dog has decided that she's gonna, I don't know, just try and lay on this like crinkly piece of plastic, and now she's gonna go and drink water and choke, and I just I don't know. You can't make this up.
It has always happened. The dogs are always a special guest.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Kitsu to just decide one day to just start barking. Just doing her scream bark, like where she tries to howl, but it literally just sounds like a person screaming.
I would love that.
It's gonna happen one day.
What's the most time-consuming piece?
Yeah, so I'd still say that bevels are probably the most time-consuming. There's a lot of different options on how you can finish the bevels. You can go up in grit and make it really, like a really fine grit and smooth. You can go up, you can hand sand it. So then it would be horizontal lines, sort of like the rest of the knife, or you can leave them kind of coarse. I personally, I've experimented with a bunch of different ones, and I kind of enjoy the coarse grind, the look, and then I smooth it out with like a Scotch Brite belt. And I think that's kind of a cool look. And they kind of intersect, the vertical lines going against with the horizontal lines and stuff. And I kind of dig that look. But yeah, there's a lot of really great knives that look awesome and different finishes and things like that. But yeah, the bevels probably still take the longest for me, and I have to take it really slow so I don't screw it up.
And that's all done like by eye, basically, right? There's no way to like quantify that or measure it. It's all just kind of how it looks, right?
Yeah, you can measure stuff, sure, and like see if you ended up in the right spot and go back and change it. And that is stuff that I do. A lot of the time I'll kind of look at it and be like, okay, yeah, this is good, and then I'll kind of mark it off with my finger, look at the other side, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm a little off here, so let me hit this again, and I try and figure out, what I'm doing wrong. Am I holding it in one orientation, just like slightly off compared to, like the other side? There's a lot of stuff that I learn every time I make a knife, which is a lot of fun. Everything's like a giant learning experience, so it keeps it exciting. It can be frustrating when you're trying to do a certain thing and it's not working out, but ultimately, I think if it's not fun, it's not really worth doing.
And it sounds like, I know Chris wanted to touch on this, but just to touch on it briefly, kind of segue into his question about it. In terms of like, sort of manual hobbies, right? Like hobbies that you do with your hands and everything. There is a certain level of like artistry involved in this process. It sounds like there's a real level of like finesse involved with this.
Yeah, for sure. There's kind of a lot of creative output, I guess, in this. But yeah, it's fun. From making stuff and just doing stuff like that, it's gratifying too. I think it's really cool. It's not something I really appreciated when I was, younger, but the older I get, the more I appreciate just making stuff with my hands and having like a finished product at the end and just knowing that I made it. I really enjoy cooking, which is very similar. I think you're taking, materials or ingredients, you're putting them together in, such a way, it's using a recipe and, coming out at the end with, a finished product, coming out with a knife, coming out with, food. And it's the same with other stuff.
It's a really interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know it's something I've heard before, but yeah, it really is, all of that stuff is very similar. Same with carpentry and all that stuff. It's all same thing. You're starting off with, like wood and this and that, and then you're turning around and turning it into something else.
Yeah, you're starting out with like a bare product that is just, chaos, and you're making shape out of the chaos.
Exactly. Yeah.
wrestling form into the material world.
I like that. I like that much more.
Do you have to draw the knife before you do it?
Sometimes I do.
Okay.
I'll kind of work out a sketch, and that's usually part of it is because of the shape, but a lot of it has to do with the material that I'm going to be using, the size of that, and how many knives I want to get out of it. Because me just turning around and being like, okay, well, I kind of want to do a knife that's sort of, let's say, like a kind of a drop point and a full tang, and I want like a 4-inch handle or something. It's just like, okay, well, I have this piece of steel and I want to do 6 knives. So how long can I make this? Maybe I want to scale it down or scale it up or something so it fits that material kind of perfectly so I can get the most for my money, because I don't want to turn around and just have some piece of steel that's just kind of wasted, that I just have a bunch that, not going to any use, not turning into anything.
That's a big part of like what differentiates it from just simply being a hobby to something that, you can actually make into a lucrative business. I feel like that's sort of the stepping stone. When you're experienced enough in something to have the foresight to kind of plan it out and maximize, the material that you have and get the most out of it. I feel like that's what takes it to the next level.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of fun. Like the planning process is fun for me. I enjoy that in most regards. I'm kind of I'm kind of a planner, but there's a certain element of just kind of jumping in and doing it too that I think is really necessary, which is again something I didn't really appreciate when I was younger. I would just, I kind of think, well, what happens if you screw this up? Then what's always, it's like, yeah, but so what? You got to just like try it. You got to just, kind of do it and give it a shot. I have people ask me about the knife making, like, how do you do it? How do you get started? How do you, do this? What do you need and all that? It's like at a certain point, you just have to try and do it. I mean, obviously I looked up a bunch of stuff. I, went really deep into the YouTube rabbit hole with, knife making and all that stuff. And there's a lot of really awesome guys that have a bunch of videos and, explain everything in much greater detail, obviously, than I'm, doing here. But at a certain point, you have to just get some stuff and try it. You have to just try and make a knife. Like make a shitty knife and and try and figure out what you did wrong. I mean, like I have my first knife still. It's a piece of shit. Like I look at it now, because I really thought, that I did pretty good. And I guess, again, for my first knife, is it pretty good? Sure. Yeah, it's, better than some I've seen that people have made. That's fine. It's not good, like compared to what I'm doing now, 2 years later. Like the stuff I'm doing now is, light years beyond what that first knife was. And there's a lot of stuff that, I learn every single time I make one, which is cool because I got to, use that to become more efficient and just kind of, make a better product every time it goes through.
I remember I read about this experiment one time they did in, I think it was Stanford, where they had 2 groups of students, and they had one group of students that each student had to they were making clay pots. And so in the one group, each student had to make a perfect clay pot. They had to make one clay pot and it had to be perfect. And in the other group, they were concerned about quantity. So they just had to make as many clay pots as they could. And they found that at the end, when they tallied them all up, the most perfect clay pots, like the greatest number of clay pots that had no imperfections at all, came from the group that did the quantity over the group that was focused on making one perfect one. And I think it kind of boils down to the same thing, where it's like sometimes you have to have a starting point, and sometimes your starting point is going to be kind of shitty, and you just have to keep going from there and you keep refining it. There's only so much you can learn about it from the outside before you actually get your hands dirty and get into any kind of hobby like that. You have to allow yourself some time to sort of mess it up in the beginning, and then from there, once you get doing it, you get making it. It gets to a point where you really start to refine the process as you go along.
Yeah, exactly. I found that with most things. I want to be able to wrap my head around what it's supposed to be, what the actual idea is, how to implement that, what it's supposed to start off with, and how it's supposed to end up. But, there's a certain element of just, the muscle memory and just kind of figuring out, the stuff in between. And I think you can probably agree with this, but I think drumming is very similar in the sense that you kind of figure out an idea at first. You have to have that idea in your head, you have to wrap your mind around that first, and then you can sort of start to like implement that and have your body start playing that thing. It's hard to just, try and perfect all that like on the spot. But yeah, and then just doing it a million times just makes everything better.
Sure.
So I definitely have that. I still have knives that, I never sold and, this and that. And I look at them and I figure out what I did or, what I didn't do, what I can do better. And yeah, there's definitely an element of just having to barrel through a bunch and just, screw stuff up. And
sure. Yeah, that's how you get comfortable.
Yeah, you hone it,
Yeah. What's your best advice to give to people who have knives at home and they want to sharpen them? Because I know it could be a little bit of a pain in the ass to sharpen a knife that's dull. So are there any special tricks to it, or is it just get a sharpener? Or I know from time to time you see people like do the knives together.
So really, I mean, well, the knives together thing is usually just theatrics. I feel like at that point you're just destroying both knives. But yeah, it's hard. Sharpening is a really involved, and that was definitely something that I was interested in first, because even just owning knives, yeah, you want them to be sharp. I mean, what's the point of having like a really nice knife if it's dull as shit and doesn't cut anything? So you want it to be, like real sharp. I do most of my sharpening on stones, like on either whetstones or diamond stones, which is a little involved and a little hard to perfect. But I feel like that's kind of par for the course in terms of getting involved in knife making and all that and all the processes. I also have like a really big belt grinder that I use for all of my knife stuff, and I use that to sharpen sometimes too. I think it depends on your knife, and it depends on what you want from your knife. If you have just like a really shitty knife and you want it to be just kind of sharp, like, yeah, go ahead, get one of those like pull through sharpeners. But a lot of like the automated sharpeners and a lot of the ones that like you just kind of like pull through and ram back and forth, they take off a lot of material. So you're kind of eating away a bunch of material. You're shortening the lifespan of that, knife. But sometimes it doesn't matter. Like if you have a knife that's made out of, a pretty bad steel, it's not going to hold an edge for very long. So it doesn't really matter. You just kind of need to go through and just get it sharp enough so when you're trying to use it, it's going to cut the thing and not slip and, cut your finger or something instead. But I think one of the most important things that I could say about sharpening that I think a lot of people overlook, let's say even if you are pretty experienced in sharpening or you have stones or you have some sort of, grinding attachment, people don't take it far enough to really develop the burr to take off, which is what gives you a really, really acute point at the end, like at the edge. A lot of people will kind of skip back and forth and they'll kind of like barrel through or put it on a honing rod and then, just kind of go through both sides over and over after they already have like a really dull knife. And they don't take it far enough to actually bring it sharp again. And then they kind of wonder, it's still sort of dull, even though they just went through the process of sharpening it.
So now if I have a good knife, let's just assume I don't have a knife from Target or something like that. Like I actually spent the money. I got a good quality knife for myself.
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is typically if you don't have kind of like a nice, like way to sharpen, stuff that's not going to kind of, mess up your knife and, or you don't want to, there's a lot of people that have nice knives. They want them sharp. You can take them to, a professional, take them to someone who can sharpen them for you. I mean, that I've sharpened knives for people.
Are you in the business of sharpening knives? I mean, this is kind of like a little bit of an advertisement for you here as well.
Sure.
So, I mean, do you want people to reach out to you if they have a nice set of knives and they need them sharpened? Like, do you want that business?
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly done that for, some friends. And it's like, oh yeah, I have these knives, I just need, a new edge on them or whatever. I've had them for a year. They're kind of dull now. And that's fine.
So what do you recommend that they buy? Let's just say they don't want to spend the money to have somebody sharpen them. So what do you recommend rather than using that whole metal piece?
Yeah, like the pull through or something.
Yeah.
So there's a few different options. It depends on how involved you want to get. I mean, are you talking you have like thousands of dollars worth of custom knives? You might want to look into, something that's going to be, rather expensive. That's kind of like a true angle, sharpening, something that's going to be able to be, set for like an angle guide and such. And there's a lot of different sharpeners on the market that are designed, like the Lansky system, let's say, is sort of a crude example of one of those. It's essentially a sharpener that you clamp your knife into, and then you have these different sharpening stones, different grits, and it has a little rod, and you can put it in a certain angled hole. So you can have a repeatable process there, and you can use that to grind that edge, down on each side. And that makes it pretty foolproof because you get to just flip it over and do it on the other side. And you're not messing up the rest of the knife. You're not taking it, like too far, anything like that, because you get to, set it yourself in real time.
I will say I actually bought a stone one time because I have really shitty kitchen knives. I spent less than $20 on my set, and I figured like, well, screw it. I've never sharpened a knife before, but I figured they're okay to practice on because I didn't spend a whole lot on them. And I bought a kind of, I don't know, like a pumice stone or something. It's got two sides to it. The one side's a little coarser and the other side's, I guess, finer. And they got like this little angle guide, like it's a little plastic guide so that you hold it at like the right angle or whatever. And I just absolutely like destroyed like 3 of my knives before I was like, well, this isn't for me. like, like I made them like way dull, and I was like, I made it worse. I have a worse knife now.
And you know what that probably is too, is, I mean, well, there's a few things that could happen. One, you could realize that, or not even realize that you're moving the angle of the knife off that little angle guide. But probably, and the most common thing that happens with those is your knife was never at that angle to begin with. So they're just like, oh yeah, it's 25 degrees. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty close. So that's cool. And then you hold it on there and then you start, like grinding away. And then you're realizing you're actually grinding at like a 20 degree or something like that. So you're really just hitting like the upper edge of that secondary bevel, and you're not really getting that tip ground down and, like kind of resharpen. Because essentially what's happening when you resharpen a knife, you have that bevel I was talking about, and down at the very bottom, there's usually what's called a secondary bevel, which is the little sharp piece. It's like just kind of looks like a line. Like if you're looking from the side, like a side profile, it looks like there's almost a little shiny line going down near the edge of the knife. And that's the secondary bevel. And that's to hold, if you had the entire bevel just going straight down to a point at the bottom, it'd be really brittle. There's nothing really to back it off. So because it's such a gradual angle, if you use a secondary bevel, essentially you're taking a little bit back and you're making it a little more extreme, of an angle. It's definitely a kind of a higher angle. When you're using a lot of those angle guides and stuff, they just give you a few different ones, like 17 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, and you probably never had that angle to begin with. So that can be a little a little difficult. You're sharpening the wrong thing at that point, and you'd have to like bring back so much material to reach a point again. Yeah, the other thing that you could try, the Wicked Edge. They're super expensive. Like they're like, $500 plus. But again, that's a repeatable system. It's something that holds your knife. You have a bunch of different stones that are different grits. They go in these rods at certain angles that you set. Let's say you have a nice, kitchen knife. That you have it sharpened at, 17 degrees. Every time you want to sharpen that knife, you can put it at 17 degrees and you could, get on there and sharpen that thing and go up in the grits and, make it, nice and sharp again. But I don't think that you have to sharpen a knife if you have something that's, pretty hard and a good steel. All that often. A lot of guys basically will call for like a honing rod, like a ceramic honing rod or something. And what that's doing is that's just realigning the edge, because an edge is very thin, obviously by design. That's, how it's sharp. And after a bunch of hard use, it sort of starts to almost roll over. Like the very, very tip sort of starts to roll over, and that's what makes it dull. By using like a hone, and this is probably what you see a lot, Chris, is it's like a piece of metal or, sort of ceramic like rod, and someone will just kind of be like sliding the knife like all over that thing like real fast, like Gordon Ramsay does it all the time, which is a little over the top, but
theatrical.
That's essentially, it's not sharpening, it's realigning the edge. Like it's not really taking material away, it's just lining it up again, so it's like a straight line down the middle.
That makes sense. Like the more you use the knife, the more you get like little micro kind of
like waves and stuff almost, and it's almost kind of rolling itself over. It's the same with when you sharpen. It's not quite as easy as just rubbing it on a stone or something and then rubbing it on the other side, and you're just good. Now you're just good to cut. There's essentially what you're doing is you're taking away material with an abrasive, and that is rolling it towards the front, and you create what's called a burr, which is like this little tiny piece of like wire. And you can't really feel it, but you can kind of see it. If you like are sharpening a knife and then you kind of touch the edge, like maybe like going up and then like pushing down, you can see there's this tiny little wire, this little line moving back and forth. And that's what's called the burr. And that's essentially just the material that you're moving off getting stuck right at the edge. And that's why people use what's called a strop, which is like a leather strop, a piece of leather that has like a compound on it, like a green compound is what I usually use, which is like a very light abrasive. And you rub it back and forth so you can remove that burr from the edge. And at that point, you have like a true, like perfect point where your two sides of material meet as one.
So real talk, I'll be very honest with you. Before I knew you did this, I never knew another knife maker. I don't know anybody that I know in my network. And I'll tell you what, I've met a lot of people and I've never met another knife maker. And I see very little pictures, but I've seen a couple of your knives and dude, they look awesome.
Thank you.
Like,
very much.
I have to tell you, like they really look great. Now you are a meticulous person.
Meticulous Mike.
How do I explain it?
Oh God.
No. You're a very meticulous person. Like you take the best pictures of food. Okay. Like I'm like super jealous because I like to cook, and no matter how great it comes out, my photos look like shit. And you honestly, and I'll tell you what, you can see that you're an artist of in some way because you can actually capture the art of
Appreciate that.
food, and your knives are pristine from just the photos that I'm seeing, and I've never even seen one in real life. So this is my real talk. Put how much money aside that you need to make a year to make a living, but if you wanted to turn this into a real knife shop, because you never know who is going to listen to this podcast. It could be 50 of our friends.
Sure.
It could be 250 where there's 100 people that are out of our network, or listen, it could get 1,000 views. You're in a very popping area right now. Kingston, New York is really turning into something now, given this whole real estate boom. Knife making, if you wanted to turn this into something where you can produce a volume and make a living and get an apprentice, what would the investment have to be? Like, what do you need to actually make this a thing? Because it seems like more than a hobby, because you know when it's a hobby, it's some things are, you know, they come out okay, but from what I see, they look great. So like this is more than a hobby.
It is a very professional level.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's fun in the sense that obviously, you know, as I said in the beginning, I was just interested in doing it. You know, it was something that I thought was cool, and I was kind of interested in figuring out how it works. And my my initial idea was, hey, I carry knives all the time. Let me make a knife, and I'll just have a knife. But that's turned into a thing where, you know, I have a lot of people asking me for knives, which is great. I've been essentially working off a list of people that have asked me for knives. And whenever I finish one, I just go through my list and then offer it up, and then I just sell it. So it's been nice because I haven't been trying to sell them. Like, they've sold themselves already, which I'm sure will change at a certain point. I mean, to go back to your question, ultimately, right now, if I were to, let's say, not work anymore, and I decide that, you know, I need to make knife making, pay the bills, like, what would I need to do? I truly wouldn't need to invest all that much. Obviously, I'd need to spend a lot more time doing it.
Whatever you need to make to live, just put that aside. Like, you obviously would need your, you know, we're talking commercial building. You would have the sharpeners there. I mean, obviously at that point, you'd want to take the business of sharpening knives too. We're talking all the different types of heating machines that I guess you would need on a different level. So like, I guess my question would be, if an investor in New York came up there, $100,000, $50,000, what gets an actual knife making professional to start up?
It's tough. I think I could probably make it work with, let's say, 10 grand, and like on the lower end of being professional and doing it full time. And that's with some stuff that would also kind of open some doors to, more experimenting, like forging, etc. But really, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of these guys, like, there are people that work in, quantity and like lower prices. And then there's like tons of other people. I mean, they're making a knife. Let's say they make a knife a week, but they sell that knife for like $3,000. You know what I mean? And there are people that are making a killing. And then there's other people that are making, let's say, 5 knives a week, but each knife sells for, $300 or $400. That's still, a chunk of change for, making knives. That's pretty cool.
You want to focus on quality. You want, not the quantity piece. It's almost like you want to be more exclusive. Like, it's order. You're not going to do a showcase of knives. It's come in, show me what you want, and we will make it. Because again, you're an artist. You're not just a knife maker. There's the trade of just making the same knife over and over again. And then there's the art of making individual knives on a case by case basis. And from what I saw, that is what you do.
Yeah, I definitely, I like to be sort of in the middle there. I enjoy making batches of knives that are, similar and such, and that's cool. But yeah, I'm more interested in having it be a handmade piece, because, I know this is sort of the opposite of what, someone would do if they're, really trying to sell themselves and their work. But you can get a cheaper knife than I make that's like perfectly fine for most people. That's there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's no reason why you can't go buy, let's say, some Gerber knife to just, beat the shit out of, that has like pretty good steel and is way cheaper, but it's a Gerber knife. No one made that for you. It's just a piece of metal that was made by machines, and you're just, it's basically disposable. I mean, of course there's nicer stuff, etc. But part of the allure, I think, with the custom knife making, like the handmade knives there's something to be said about you're buying a piece made by someone, for you. It's the same with going and eating good food. You go to a restaurant, it's like, you're getting something that on paper you could get somewhere else for cheaper, but you're going to a really nice restaurant with like a good ingredients, a really good, like well-known chef, and they're making you something. It's special. And I think that there's a big aspect of, or that is a large aspect of, why you would go this route. I mean, you could argue that, some of these people are using really special, steels, et cetera, things like that are, going to withstand much more than your commercial knife. But yeah, I think a lot of it is having a handmade thing. I think that that's cool. And the more I appreciate that. I think it's just cool making stuff. It's cool having stuff from people that are making things themselves. I mean, it's like half the reason, like I made my dining room table for no other reason than I wanted to see if I could make one. My wife wanted a farmhouse table, so I made it.
Wow, you like made it from scratch and everything?
Yeah, like this. Yeah, my table is like, I made a table and benches and everything, and I just I looked up, how to do it, got some lumber, did all that, came up with my own not my own design. I use that, kind of loosely, but my own, sizing, my own specs. I wanted it a little taller because I'm a little taller. And yeah, I made it. It took me like a month. I would make it after work and, stain the top, did all that, painted, the bottoms, and my wife was happy, got her farmhouse table she wanted. But I get to know that this table was made by me, and I think that's a special feeling. And I enjoy that with the knives. I enjoy that with, a lot of other things. I think it's important too to, just support, people, and your friends and people doing crafts, just other craftspeople and things.
Sure, definitely.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a piece of art. So, I mean, definitely keep it up because I personally think you never know. I think it's an artful trade that I think you'd be surprised that I would say in the future, it's definitely something that I see you having your own real business, and I fully support
appreciate
it.
That.
And while we're on the discussion of support, I need a knife. And I'll tell you exactly what I need. My dog's old. My dog's 11 years old. I love her to death.
God.
She has to live.
This is going down a dark path.
She has to live. She has to live forever. So what I've decided to do is I stopped buying her treats, anything that is from the store. So I've been, surprisingly, Chris Amadeo moved to Pennsylvania. Now he's making fucking jerky now too. I started making my dog jerky, and she loves it, but it's actual pork. I can't cut through the pork on top anymore. I need a custom sharp knife to cut through the upper part of the pork to get thin pieces so that I can obviously dehydrate it or hydrate it, whatever the hell I'm supposed to do. I want to go on your list. I need one of those knives to do that. I need something super sharp for that.
I can do that. I can certainly do that. I am for making a jerky knife.
Put me on the list. I want one of your pieces of art, and also do me a favor. And I don't know if it's possible, but do like a little signature initial on the knife.
I'm sure I could figure something out.
All right.
Maybe I'll have some stamps by then.
That'd
Absolutely.
be awesome. And then, Tom, I guess if you have any couple more questions, we did create a game for you today because I think we're going to try to add that into our little routine. So we're going to
try and engage the guest a little more.
I'm
so
glad you've started with me.
Yeah. You are the guinea pig. So, basically, Chris and I came up with a bunch of knife related would you rathers.
Oh boy, sounds spicy.
Oh yeah, it's gonna get real spicy, buddy. So I've got a list of 10 sharp things here, and it's would you rather. So we'll start. Would you rather have Pyramid Head of Silent Hill? Would you rather have his great knife, or Link of Zelda fame? Would you rather have his master sword? Let's say you were trapped in some kind of hellscape and you had to fight your way out. Would you rather have the great knife or the master sword?
I'm going with the Pyramid Head. It's just more badass.
Yeah, right? And it's so heavy. And like what you lose in the
dexterity and stuff. I mean, I just want to fucking cleave through everything. I'm just going for mass destruction. Yeah,
there you go.
Pyramid Head. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's say let's say you're trapped somewhere. Let's say you're in I don't want to say a Saw type scenario, but let's say you're at the mercy of some maniac, right? And he gives you a razor sharp fork or a razor sharp spoon, and that's the only thing you have to eat with. Which would you rather? The razor sharp spoon, which is sharp on all sides, like the entire like outside sort of circumference of the spoon is razor sharp, or a razor sharp fork where the sides of the tines are razor sharp and the edges are razor sharp.
And now this is for me to eat with, or this is for me to like kill
This is
this
the only-
person with.
Wow. Let's say the person has you confined in a room.
Okay, so I'm definitely there's no attacking going on. I just need to eat with. Ooh, man, that's tough because I feel like you know what? I'm gonna go for the spoon because I think it
Really?
would be a little rough if you cut the sides of your mouth. But what if dude gives you soup? You're fucked with a fork.
That's true too. I didn't even think of that. Wow. See, you're bringing my hypothetical to a new level here. Okay, so here let's get into a little bit of wizardry for a second here. Let's say you got a knife that you're making for yourself, right? And you're just a lone wanderer in, like, let's say Oblivion or something to that effect. Do you do a knife with ice enchantment or fire enchantment?
I'm going fire enchantment.
Nice.
You know, I just I equate that to just being more of an attack-based character.
Okay.
You know,
That's fair. Okay.
yeah. If you freeze
All right.
them, then you know whatever it is just breaks off. That sucks.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're a bear. Razor sharp teeth or razor sharp claws?
Claws.
Claws. Yeah, that's a good answer.
I mean,
Okay.
you know that I think yeah, if you bite something, it's gonna be fucked anyway. So with the claws, you know, at least you have like a reach.
That's true. Yeah, as far as the teeth go, yeah, if something's already in your mouth, it kind of more depends on like your jaw strength than
Yeah, like
than the
even a
sharpness of
hippo
your
can
teeth.
bite your leg off. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. You're transported back in time and in the middle of like a Dynasty Warriors type battle where there's just people everywhere and you just got to mow them all down. Right. Katana, broadsword, or claymore?
I don't have the Lubu option. What did he have? He had that like giant. It was like the two stabs. What are they called? With like the blades on each end. I don't. It was. I'm forgetting what those like Chinese stabs are called with like the blades at the end. It's like not. It's not a spear because it's like designed to be sort of a slashing, you know, weapon, not necessarily a stabbing one. But it has like, yeah, you remember Lubu, right? He has.
Yeah.
He has like essentially the blades on each end, and then it's essentially like it's like crossed. He has like two of them. They're like crossed over, and he's just really mowing everything down. But all right, I digress. I'll go back. I think I'd probably go for the katana because why not? We're in Dynasty Warriors.
There you go. Hell yeah. Okay, now you're a ninja. Is your signature weapon a dagger, get up close and personal, or is it caltrops so that you can do your deed and get away?
I'm trying to go up close and personal.
There you go. I like it. Okay, now let's say you're still a ninja. Do you go with 1 kunai or 20 throwing knives?
20 throwing knives.
Okay. And then lastly, I saw this. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Hunt. But there's a scene in The Hunt where at the very end, Hilary Duff is cutting, or no, not Hilary Duff. Is it? Yeah, it's Hilary Duff.
Hilary
right?
Swank.
Hilary Swank. There we go. God damn it. So Hilary Swank is chopping tomatoes, and she says that the secret to chopping tomatoes is to use a bread knife. Do you agree or disagree? And if you disagree, what knife do you use?
Well, if you just use a sharp knife, then it's fine. Because I think what she's referring to is the serrations on a bread knife kind of bite into the skin of the tomato, and it makes it so it's not. Well, I don't know if you've ever tried to cut a tomato with like a dull knife. It sucks.
Oh, yeah.
Because
it sucks.
it's sort of, it'll start to push down on the skin, and it has like enough give to where it kind of takes it and almost wants to like roll the blade off it, you know, because it's like rounded, which can be super dangerous. If you have like a sharp knife that has like a little bit, like a sharp edge and has like a little bit of tooth, that'll just go through there, no problem. But yeah, her idea is if you have, you know, some shitty knives, like again, I'm looking at my really shitty kitchen set right now. Any of those knives would suck except for like the bread knife because it's serrated. It'll bite right in, and then, you know, tomatoes are soft and fleshy inside there anyway. So yeah, I would argue that the best knife for cutting tomatoes is a really sharp knife. But yeah, if you're just going to go for dull knives, bread knife is the way to go. That's a good hack. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good to know that movie had some solid advice in it then.
Yeah,
that wasn't the only solid advice that movie gave. That was actually a really good one. I do recommend that. It was just fun. It was just a fun, mindless, violent movie.
Well, it wasn't totally mindless though, right? It had kind of a point to it.
Yeah, it did.
It did.
But it was still some mindless violence, which was just good.
The Kingdom, or the goddamn, what was that other one? Death
sentence.
God, purge that one from my memory because I hate it so much.
All right. So my would you rathers actually don't come with a story. It's just which one would you rather go with.
Chris
So
is trying to say I was too sanctimonious.
would you rather Jason's machete or Freddy's claws?
Machete.
Uma Thurman's Kill Bill sword or Highlander's sword?
Kill Bill.
Melina from Mortal Kombat Sai or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Raphael Sai?
Going Raphael Sai. Why not?
All right. Michael Myers' kitchen knife or Ghostface from Scream's knife?
Ooh. I'll go old school. I'll go Michael Myers.
All right. Jack Nicholson's axe from The Shining or Gimli's axe from Lord of the Rings?
Oh, Ghibli's for sure.
Wolverine's claws or Candyman's hook?
Oh, Wolverine's claws.
All right. Robin Hood's bow or Katniss Everdeen's bow from Hunger Games?
I'm going to go classic again. I'm just going to go with Robin Hood. Why not?
All right. Then we got Rambo's survival knife or Dundee's Bowie knife?
Oh, I'm going Rambo's knife. I can't not. I mean, Bowies are sweet, but like, got to go for the Rambo knife.
All right. Then I'm going to throw some history at you. Do you want the MK3 Navy knife or the Marine Strider SMF knife?
I would go for the MK3.
All right. And then lastly, we got the Soviet NR-43 combat knife or the WW2 Japanese jet fighter survival knife?
Jesus Christ, I don't know what either of those are.
Jet fighter survival knife, it's called?
Yeah.
That sounds like a piece of shit. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine they'd give a very good knife to somebody that they thought was going to crash a plane.
No.
So it's
I
probably
need to look this up. Jet fighter survival knife.
survival is in quotes.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's your knife, buddy. Yeah, no, you'll be fine if there's an eject button. Yeah.
It's you crash the plane. It's to cut the parachute so you don't land.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Wow.
So you can't be captured.
Well, listen,
yeah,
the other knife is a Soviet knife, so that means the handle's really sharp because the
That's
Soviet
right.
Russia, the knife cuts you.
Yeah, they give that to their children. Yeah, when you turn 2, that's what you get. That and just like a bottle of vodka.
Go fight bear.
Dude, I love that. I love the stories of like, like people like Khabib and stuff like that, like wrestling bears as like training.
Oh yeah, dude, that's insane. It's so insane to think that like that people have like domesticated bears, like obviously not on a grand scale, but like you had like Bart the bear, who was like the bear in like every bear movie in like the 80s and 90s. Like somebody trained him. Somebody was just like, yeah, I'm gonna make this bear like listen to commands and stuff. And like the whole time that bear just has the ability to just be like, I'm just gonna wake up one day and just be feral and destroy everybody.
Oh yeah, I feel like we take for granted like the size of these animals. You know what I mean? Like going to a zoo and seeing an actual, tiger or something like that is insanity. I mean, like what an insane creature. But yeah, same with, like bears and like gorillas and like all that stuff. It's like we're so used to seeing them in movies as like cartoons and everything. You like think about what they actually are in person, and it is horrifying.
My dad told me a story that when he was a kid, I don't know exactly how this happened because he doesn't really remember the details. There's a picture of him with a monkey, and the monkey, it's like a chimpanzee, and it has its arm around him.
God.
And I remember I was like, what the hell? When I found the picture, like, when did this happen? He's like, oh, I don't know. There was like a monkey or something. I took a picture with it. And it's like, oh, no shit. But he said that the only thing he remembers about it was that when the monkey put his arm around him, he like kind of pulled him in, and my dad had a bruise.
Like, oh, dude, they're so strong. It's so
insane.
Crazy.
I tell you, man, like it's a humbling experience when you're around an animal like that and you see the size of it. I remember I saw and this was on TV, but I remember it was some animal sanctuary or something, and there was a giraffe that just decided to break the enclosure or whatever, and it ran into this town, and like the giraffe was just like eaten out of this tree that was in somebody's front. So they all showed up to the yard, and they're trying to wrestle this giraffe, and now the giraffe's pissed because like they showed up, and the giraffe was like, like no, this is me, this is my time, and like dude, they're trying to wrestle this giraffe down, and like the giraffe was just like swinging its head around, and they got ropes on this thing trying to bring it down. It looked like something. It looked like something prehistoric. It was like, Jesus, man! Like this thing was
Can't
so
sleep
big.
on giraffes. They're fucking huge, man. Same with the elephants and stuff. Think about how insane an elephant attacking a group of people would actually be.
Oh yeah.
Like you'd have no way to stop it.
No, you don't. Like a big ass like bull elephant, like with the tusks and all. Like,
Oh yeah.
If he just wants to ruin your shit, he will. Like,
Yep.
there's the only thing you can hope is that like you don't make the list of things he wants to destroy that day.
Yeah. I'm not going to stoop to your level and seek revenge.
Yeah. Then the elephant goes on to direct death sentence too.
Yeah, right. What's the best way for people to contact you if they do want to go on your waiting list?
Instagram and Facebook typically is a good way to shoot me a message and kind of figure out, what I have going on. So yeah, as I said, I usually I'll just kind of go through and just sort of make stuff and then I offer it up. So if anyone's interested, feel free to hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. I'll get you on the list. I might change that down the future, in the future. And I was thinking about going to such a platform where, I might sort of announce when I have something finished and then do some sort of sale on a certain day. So that way just kind of first come, first serve. But at least for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be continuing to do this and just kind of offering it up, at least until I finish the list that I have going right now, because I feel guilty. Facebook is Mike Pistone. And then I'm trying to remember my Instagram handle. I think it's like there's an underscore in there now. I don't remember. Yeah, it's Mike_Pistone and another underscore.
All right, cool. Well, listen, Mike, thanks a lot. We will be talking
No problem.
soon.
Thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you, all right?
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. See you tomorrow, buddy.
All right. See you.
Bye. That was a very exciting interview.
Absolutely. So I would say, everyone, if you are interested in learning more about knives, you have Mike's contact information. And if you do want one, you might as well get on that waiting list now because it seems that he is super busy. So get on that and tune in the following week. We are on YouTube now, thanks to Tom. He created our YouTube channel. Just search the Chris and Tom Show. We're on Apple. We are on Spotify. And then, of course, wherever you find yourself a Buzzsprout link.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
So long.